I just had a black thought. Put your mind in gear and put your thinking cap on. Well, now, let's go backwards to come forwards. First of all, you were at the commercial appeal. You left. We're not going to get into the specifics of that. Anybody who knows anything knows that when you do those exits, you don't get into the specifics of that. But I will say this, and this was said at the State of Black Memphis this past Monday. People think that, oh, they're having good conversations about what's happening in our community. And individuals will say, well, that's fine and good. But understand something. Wendi received death threats. I don't want you to say anything about that. I'll say it. She received death threats. If you took any time at all to see the conversations that followed on the web page of the Commercial Appeal, and I did it with regularity. As a matter of fact, I think a couple of times I reached out to you when I saw some of the things that were said. People were nasty. They were vile. They would say things like, go back to, you know how those phrases come. And it was really done in poor taste. And you'd be surprised the types of individuals that you have in our community. And so you went through a lot in doing that column. And if you want to respond to that, let me at least give you an opportunity. But you went through a lot in doing that column.
You know, this is part of the problem when you don't have, I think, parity in different industries. You know, when I became a columnist, there was nobody for me to look to in Memphis and say, oh, okay, that's another black female columnist. Let me ask her what it's been like for her. I mean, literally, there is nobody else. And so you're kind of charting your own territory in a community that's not had that voice, in a newsroom that's never had to protect, support, nurture, encourage somebody with that kind of voice. And so I think institutions as a whole that are run pretty much by white men, they just don't have any frame of reference on how to do this, nor do they have people of color in key decision-making roles to give them feedback if they would be so humble as to seek feedback on how to handle these kind of things. And one comment you made about the online comments, you know, they're brutal, and I kind of made a general rule not to read them. But after one of the threats I got, I said, well, let me see what else is being said, you know, because you know, I just kind of wanted to get a sense of it. And I'll say this: I think when an organization allows comments that are just right up to the line, you know, just there was one. Somebody said I should be treated like a domestic terrorist. There was another where they said they wanted to lock me in a shed. So when an organization allows that level of vitriol on its site, and then another reader wants to take it a step up, then they threaten violence, right? Because that's the next step. And so I think it's incumbent upon organizations to watch the level of bile that they allow on their site, because when you let it get this high and somebody wants to escalate it, the next thing they're going to do is threaten violence. So I think it's really irresponsible for organizations to want to protect the anonymity of their commenters over the physical safety and emotional health of their staff. It doesn't make any sense to me. And yeah, but again, a lot of times these are organizations that they don't have any clue how to deal with this, and they may. In some ways, you have to, at some point you start to wonder, do they agree with the commenters? Do you know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't they speak out more strongly? Why wouldn't they circle the wagons more closely? Do they kind of agree with some of this vitriol? And that's why they're kind of like, well, you know, I guess if people are threatening her, she's got what's coming to her, you know? And so I think those are just interesting things for organizations to explore when they're having voices that maybe their readers aren't generally used to.
Well, let me flip it this way. Often I tell people that you can't legislate morality, because you have an arm of the church that tries to legislate morality at every turn. That's why, for example, I'm voting no on Amendment 1. Right. And the reason It's not that I'm jumping up and down for people to run to get abortions, but I understand that a woman has the right to have a choice as to whether she gets an abortion or not. And I cannot legislate somebody's morality. If you understand the Christian life, for an example, you begin to understand that you cannot live the Christian life without the Holy Spirit. If it's a challenge to live the Christian life being a Christian, how can you live it without full equipment? But yet people want to legislate morality. So this is the same, different side of the same coin, so to speak. You have to allow for free speech, and you have to have people, whether you want to call them public intellectuals, whether you want to call them opinionators, to help to challenge our thinking and cause us to look at something from another perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I would be among those who would fight for online commenters to be able to say just about anything they want to say. I don't think the government should ever infringe upon those rights. Do I think a news outlet should create a toilet beyond, at the bottom of one of their writers' work for people to dump in? No, I don't think that's. I think there's other places people can have that kind of dialogue if they want to have that kind of dialogue online, and I just think there should be some kind of standards of decency. The way Bruce Van Wingarden at the Flyer, who I write for now, the way he described it to me is that he considers the website his house. And so if you come in his house and you put his feet on, you put your feet up on his table, he's going to ask you to leave. So it's the same kind of, equivalent. And I'm a guest in his house, I'm writing. He's not going to let people just treat his guests any old kind of a way. And so I think that's a healthy model. You might allow some heated back and forth, but you're not going to allow them to come in and turn up, move your furniture around.
I fully agree with that. But now let's move this conversation forward. I want to move it forward in several ways. First of all, I want to mention the fact, actually, that now you write for the Memphis Flyer. Yes. You write a bi-monthly column, and this is also going to tie into some of what you presented to us during the State of Black Memphis. I want to just pull up a couple of the columns and the subject matter, and then just kind of get out of your way and let you freestyle, so to speak, because, I'm not going to tell your age, don't quite know your age, but look, you've been around since hip-hop was born, so you know how to freestyle. So anyway, you wrote about the power of poverty in addressing the issues of poverty in Memphis. Then you wrote an article that said, husband wanted, unemployed need not apply. Now, on the surface, some may think you were going in one direction with that, but when you read the first paragraph, you say very plainly, if you want to destroy a community, someone once told me, take away the man's job. To make a man's job search nearly impossible, burden him with a criminal record. I hope y'all heard what was in that. And then the last one, and we kind of alluded to it, I alluded to it. What happens next? If Amendment 1 passes, Roe v. Wade will become meaningless. So I kind of want to give you an opportunity to kind of open that up. You're with the Flyer now. Talk to us about that and just kind of cover some of this landscape for us. Okay,
so the column about the husband wanted, unemployed men not implied, that grew out of some Pew Research Center data that they collected and done a poll with women and asked them what were they looking for most in a marriage partner. And I think it was 78% of women said somebody with a job. So you get that, no romance without finance.
Win Guthrie, yeah.
Yes. So everybody kind of gets that concept. But if you look in Memphis, there are only 59 employed young men for every 100 single women, and they're dividing that as 85, I think, to 34, and I can say I'm out of that demographic. And so if you look at building, and that ties into the first column, if you look at building wealth in a community and combating poverty, you're going to have some kind of employment. You're going to have to have some kind of finances. Well, when you look at our kind of hyper prison industrial complex and our desire almost to solve every kind of social problem with some kind of incarceration police solution, you're creating a group of people who aren't going to be able to get jobs, men who are not going to be able to get jobs. And men who aren't able to get jobs are not desirable as marriage partners. And so then if you look at, people like to lament, the number of single mothers in here. Well, who are they in Memphis? Who are they going to partner with if their partner can't get a job? I mean, there are lots of women, with children or not, that don't want to be in a relationship with someone they feel like they're going to have to be supporting financially. You want it to be a partnership, and you support each other. And so all these things kind of dovetail in ways that I think that maybe we don't consider when we think about public policy. And so one of the things that Memphis has done that's actually, I think, very commendable is they banned the box. So if you're applying for a job with the city of Memphis, there will not be a box on the application that says, have you been convicted of anything other than a minor traffic offense? So it gives you an opportunity to try to get your foot in the door on a job before you have to disclose whether or not you have a criminal, a felony conviction record or not. And so I think those are definite steps that legislators can take, that elected bodies can take to try to solve the poverty problem. Because there's a lot of emphasis, I think, in Memphis about education and charter schools, and do we want to do vouchers and that kind of stuff. But you're still, at the end of the day, sending these children home to families where the parents don't have enough income, or they're working too many jobs to be involved a lot in their children's education or helping them with homework or what have you. So it's got to be a more holistic approach. All the charter schools in the world are not going to fix all that ails Memphis.
And plus, just to add to that, if you've already undereducated 2 generations before that young person, you have not created a family that's even sensitive to the role of education for their children.
Right. And it's just got to be way more comprehensive than I think that we're thinking about. And if you look at, like in New York, you look at Harlem's Children's Zone, the reason why that's had some success is because it completely embraced the entire community. It wasn't just the kids in the school that day, what they're learning, what they're reading, or having a longer school day. But it's about, talking to, mothers before their children are even born about how to, read to their kids and nurture their children and, workforce investment, all that sort of thing. So I think there's the potential there to do that in Memphis. I don't know that we're quite getting all the pieces together quite yet.
I think the uniqueness about Memphis is this city is so interconnected. For example, if we sat here and talked about all the people we know, we probably know a lot of the same people and probably know them well. And in these communities in Memphis, although some have become transient, many of them have people with roots in the community, and people pretty much know or have an idea of who's around them. So with that knowledge, you could probably reduce crime if you wanted to, do a whole host of things if you wanted to. But I guess the willpower of the average resident may not be present to do some of those things.
Well, I think people get jaded, I know for me, particularly when I was working in a daily newspaper newsroom, it's really easy to get kind of negative about all the drumbeat of negative news and crime news and unemployment rates and just all kind of things that make you feel like, okay, we're never going to get this right. But I think the solutions are out there, and we have to feel like we can make a difference. A lot of times people don't even go out and vote because they say, well, my vote's not going to count. Well, if everybody thinks that, then no, your vote's not going to count. But I think, and this Amendment 1 is a great example, and this is the amendment that would change the state constitution. And the language is just a hot mess. But it would allow the state legislature to then go forward and outlaw abortion if Roe v. Wade gets overturned, and to make no exceptions in the case of rape, incest, the health of the mother. So that means if you have a daughter or if you're of childbearing age and you were raped and became pregnant, it would not be your choice whether or not to end that pregnancy. And I think that's scary. I mean, I know if that happened to me or my niece, I would want to have that choice, right? I would not want to have to carry that child to term if I did not choose to. And so I don't know that people who are thinking about Amendment 1 or thinking about voting yes, if they understand what that actually means, what that could lead to.
Well, let me do this as we get ready to close this segment. You are involved in a lot of things. First of all, I didn't even get to speak to Common Ground. Before we go to the close, I want you to talk about Common Ground. Unfortunately, we were not up and running before they had the movie
Right.
premiere, which helped to bolster Common Ground. But I want you to speak to that, because I think some people get this opinion of you, and hence the hate mail, or so to speak, that you're one way, but you're really about consolidating and bringing this community together, and you were one of the architects of Common Ground. Speak to that a little bit.
So Common Ground is a race relations initiative here in Memphis. It's 7 years old now, started in 2007, and it grew directly out of my job as a columnist. I was hearing from readers who would say they were white, who would say, why do black people do XYZ? And then I would hear from readers who would identify themselves as black and say, well, tell white folk XYZ. And so it was clear to me that people didn't have a space to have these conversations together. So that's why I created Common Ground. So oftentimes when I would hear from readers who would say, well, you're the racist and you're making it worse, I'm like, yeah, so I started an entire organization to try to help solve these problems, because I realized there is a problem, and I wanted to create the space for people to have these tough conversations. And so that's what Common Ground does. We have 2 public sessions a year, in the spring and the fall. And the film event that you just referred to was coordinated in part by Tawana Stout Mitchell and Gail Jones Carson. Thank you both ladies for doing that. And we did a advanced screening of Dear White People, and it was great. The movie was great. The post-film discussion was great. And again, it's just creating the opportunities in our community to have, cross-racial dialogue and to try to make things better. And I always leave these events being very encouraged about the city of Memphis. So if I'm kind of down on one thing, one time, or kind of depressed by the news, I come around all these other people who really, really do want to make a difference and are sacrificing their time and talent to make that happen. So, yeah, Common Ground, Memphis.org. You should check us out. All
right. And also, she now has a blog and a webpage. So if you go to wendycthomas.com, wendycthomas.com, if you thought that she got, I guess, a little mealy-mouthed, or if you thought that she lost the edge, I think we're seeing more of an edge on this webpage. I'm just going to read some of the stuff that's on here and then give you the floor. It's on here. The top article posted on October the 21st. If you support racist systems, guess what? You're kind of racist. You need to read that. And then also it says, get schooled literally on inequality in Memphis. And then the next one, stop the Ebola stigma, Liberian, not a virus. And it is a YouTube entry on here that says, I am a Liberian, not a virus. And then it goes further. Let's pick up on the Ebola piece and then move up, and then you go ahead and freestyle again. Talk to us about that, because I have some opinions on that myself. But go right ahead.
Well, as a journalist, I'm always consuming news, information, whatever, and so I forget even how I stumbled across it, if it was Twitter, Facebook, or somebody sent me a link to this video that these Liberians were doing, trying to confront some of the stereotypes, I guess, that are being kind of perpetuated about people from these West African nations that are most impacted, and trying to kind of stress their humanity, and so they're not just an illness that is affecting a very, very small minority of those, the residents of that country, and a very, very tiny, minority of, it's minuscule percentage of Americans, but the fear is real and hysteria, and I get that. I'm about to travel overseas, and I'm thinking, gosh, I hope nobody sneezes on me, even though they say it's not airborne. You're like, there's a little bit of the paranoia, but I think we do need to remember these people's humanity, and I think particularly because the disease has spread the fastest in Africa, then you get a whole bunch of kind of race, xenophobia kind of crap kind of intertwined with some of our hysteria around Ebola. So that was just a post try to remind people to that these are humans, these are people, this is us.
And really, it's more of an economic piece than a race piece, because in some of those nations, they're not able to do some of the things that we take for granted that are done here. I've been to Africa twice. Matter of fact, went to the hospital once, and I had more medicine in my medicine cabinet than this particular hospital had. It's just an economy of scale. It has a lot to do with the economics. The other piece is, and I've told people this, as you probably know, I think we talked, I had 3 bereavements in my family, and I have family in like 9 different countries. So I went to London twice. I went to Kingston, Jamaica once this year. I was in London during the time when this Ebola situation started. Matter of fact, I first heard about it there. And the significance of that is when you fly from Africa, most times you fly into Europe first, and then you leave Europe and fly here. So the thing is, people fly all over the world every day. Every day, I think they say between 3,000 and 5,000 people leave that part of Africa and fly all over the place. So when you talk about closing borders and doing all these types of things, it's impractical. Because if you want to get technical, I probably got exposed to it, the traveling I've done this year, and I don't have any symptoms. So some of this is just flat out hysteria.
Absolutely.
Some of it's racist. And what really needs to happen is for us to assist the countries where it's taking place the worst. Nigeria already had an infrastructure, so if you notice, they were able to get on top of theirs and nip it in the bud. But these other 3 nations are extremely poor, and it's more an economic situation where the health departments of those nations just can't handle the load. That's what it is. But anyway, I stepped on your freestyle.
No, you're good.
You talked about inequality and you talked about racism. Just kind of give us a little snippet of that before we wrap up.
Well, to get schooled on inequality, literally, one of the other things, this is how you know I'm part Jamaican, because I got about 3-4 jobs now. So one of the other things I'm doing now is I'm a visiting scholar at the University of Memphis in the sociology department. And so in the spring with Dr. Wanda Rushing, we'll be teaching a class on economic inequality in Memphis specifically. So I'm really, really excited about that. And so it's going to be for like senior and junior level students. So we're recruiting students now. So if you're at University of Memphis, look us up, SOC 4904, I believe is the course number.
Yes.
And so I'm really looking forward to that, and it kind of dovetails on a lot of my the topics that I'm kind of most passionate about, and that I was writing about the Commercial Appeal about, before I left. And, we're approaching, in not too long, the 50th anniversary of the King assassination. And so, when King was killed, he was beginning his Poor People's Campaign. And so if we were to look in 2018 and say, well, what have we done with this sacrifice? In terms of economic inequality, where is Memphis now? I think that now is the time to start asking ourselves those questions and assembling that kind of data and doing that kind of research. And so the class will be kind of a launching point for some of that. And unfortunately, inequality and poverty and racism are all dovetailed, they're right there together. And so I think sometimes get to the post that says, if you support racist systems, you're kind of racist. I think that sometimes we like to think of racism as like the Klan in hoods and, the torches and that sort of thing. And I think that's an extreme example, but I think that racism can also be being in a board meeting and they're talking about hiring a new executive and the room is full of white people and all the applicants are white, and you believe in diversity, but you don't say anything, right? So you're supporting a racist system. That's what you're doing, and with your silence, you're being complicit. And so I think if people can start to think about the spaces they're in and who they're advocating for in those spaces, who's not in the room, right? And so, like, one of the analogies I like to use is my gay brothers and sisters, right? And so if I'm in a space and I hear someone, maybe it's all black people, maybe it's just all straight people or whatever, and I hear somebody say something that's a little homophobic, it's a little jarring, I'll call them on that, right? Because I would want somebody to do that for me if they were in a room and somebody saying anything about women or black people or what have you. And so I think it's really, we all need to kind of examine ourselves and be aware of the biases that we're perpetuating and the systems that we're being a part of when maybe we don't even realize what we're supporting. So. Agreed.
Well, it's been great having you. The time has flown. And let me just say this to you. Anytime you want to come on, we'll make room. Anyway,
we Jamaican flag?
Look, I have one. Don't play.
I do too.
Matter of fact, I left my hat, my Jamaican hat.
I have
but anytime you want to come, feel free to come by. any way we can collaborate and help to push what you're doing, because that's really why we have black media and why we're trying to expand the scope of black media in this city, so that we can have a voice, so that you won't be by yourself, so that we'll have more wind beneath your wings, so to speak. So y'all go to wendycthomas.com. Wendi, not with a Y, but with an I.
WENDI.
That's it. wendycthomas.com. Check her out. You can also go to the Memphis Flyer, memphisflyer.com. Twice a month, you'll see articles from Wendi Thomas. She's a heavy hitter. Support her. We're going to come back in a couple of minutes. This is Black Thought, and I'm your host, Dr. Hutchinson.